Nobody can drive the Red Bull. He'll qualify on pole and his teammate will be 18th. I've never seen anything like it.
Max in a Mercedes is pretty uncomfortable to think about.
The image of Lewis Hamilton winning the British Grand Prix last year was a huge moment of triumph and redemption to cap off a brilliant Mercedes career.
But what's gone wrong for Hamilton and Ferrari? And could it finally click for them at Silverstone this weekend, where 500,000 people are expected to attend, as Brad Pitt's F1 film continues to chase the box office records for a sports movie?
The best plot twist, though, might be four-time world champion Max Verstappen going to Mercedes. Are they interested with Red Bull struggling? Is Verstappen going to get out of his contract?
We're going to speak to World Championship winner Jenson Button, and as McLaren dominate F1 with friend of the pod Lando Norris in prime position to take his first ever Silverstone win, we're going to speak to McLaren CEO Zak Brown and former Formula One driver Mark Webber.
Welcome to the Sports Agents.
Hello, Mark.
Hi, Gabby. How are you?
Oh, I'm a wee bit tired this morning because we kicked off the Euros last night, and we're doing the first tranche of matches from the studios in Salford. I come to you now from the south of England, and we're recording this in the morning and got off air quite late last night. So, and it's always, you know what it's like when you go home after something like that, you're kind of mulling it around in your mind, aren't you, for quite a while afterwards, and the match and everything else, and the beginning of a big tournament. So, I feel a little bit, a bit tired. Yeah, a bit tired.
But it was a successful start, wasn't it? And a good game.
Yeah, it was good because Switzerland, obviously, as the host, you want to have a good tournament. They've never qualified from a group in the Euros, and they've only been in a couple of Euros before. And they were leading 1-0 at half time, and they were good for that lead. They were, it was all Switzerland. Norway, who are stacked with players. They've got players who've won the Champions League this season. They've got the former Ballon d'Or winner in Ege Hegerberg, who's the current captain, who's, of course, missed 5 years of her international career in protest over the lack of equality she felt in Norwegian football. She's leading them, and as well as countless other names in there. And they were awful in the first half. But it was Hegerberg who came back with the equaliser. Then they got a penalty that they missed, and it was an own goal. So yeah, they ended up coming out on top, Norway. But I did feel for the Swiss because your opening game.
You just want to get off to a good start in your own tournament, don't you?
You do, and now they've obviously got to play Iceland, who got beaten by Finland. So yeah, it was a good start.
So the sport never ends, really. It's such an entertaining summer of sport. Got seeds falling everywhere at Wimbledon, and the Brits doing well, which has surprised us, the Brits, which is probably the most British thing in the world. I think at some point we have to park history and being surprised at one or two Brits going through it and realise that there is actually a lot of strength in depth in British tennis, particularly amongst the kids.
Yeah, there's some good talent there. And it's interesting how many of them always talk about what Andy Murray has done for them.
Yeah.
There seems to be a wider range of kids, from different backgrounds and different parts of the country. And I think Andy Murray's, the fact he was from Scotland, from a non-tennis area, didn't go to one of those big posh schools where they play tennis to a high level. He played on the park courts as a kid. All that stuff, I think, probably resonated with more kids than, maybe ever before. So you're seeing that now. This is the wave coming through, and it's great to see, isn't it? And do you know what it feels like at Wimbledon as well? There's so many top seeds falling. The sport at the moment does feel like everyone can beat everyone. And I'm saying this in the hope that Emma Raducanu believes that, because her performance was incredible to get through to the third round, but she has got the reward of Arina Sabalenka.
Yeah, which will be fascinating to watch. It will be fascinating to watch, will that? And then bubbling along in the background, still in the background a little bit, I think, isn't it? The Lions Tour of Australia, because they haven't played a test yet. They've had a couple of warm-up matches down under. But the story there is more off the pitch, and Andy Farrell going to bring in son Owen to join this squad because Elliot Daly has broken his arm. And I suppose if you're looking at it from a positive point of view, and you tell me, there's a versatility to Owen Farrell, and there's a leadership to Owen Farrell, and he's a former Lion anyhow, so he's not going to be fazed by any of it.
No, I was just discussing this with Mr. Logan before we came on the pod, actually. And he said it's all about the centre. because obviously because Daly filled in at centre as well, playing fullback, and actually they've got quite a lot of fullbacks, but it's the centre where they potentially could be down if they had an injury there, and he is versatile in that respect, and I think as his leadership qualities and all the winning he has done in his career, he would be a great addition, and he knows the head coach really well.
Yeah, well, yeah. and actually, but on that, people assume, oh, it's his son, so he's going to pick him. I would have thought it's harder the other way, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Look, he probably is who I want for this.
Yeah.
But he's my son, so
if it was a 10 that got injured, I think he'd find it harder to bring him in because of the calls for George Ford, and but it's because Owens, obviously plays 12, and I think that is where the crux of this has come, and he's probably wrestled with it with his coaches, hasn't he? I imagine Andy Farrell. He's a thoughtful man. He would have said to the rest of the team, "Look, is this the right call?" And nobody would let him, I think, make something that was pure nepotism, make a decision. Nepotism.
I suppose the flip side of it, and where the questions are being asked. Owen Farrell hasn't played international rugby in nearly 2 years. He hasn't played at all in nearly 9 weeks when he suffered a concussion playing for Racing against Lyon on the 4th of May. That was his last game for them. He's moving back to join Saracens. So it's
whether he's
that's what the critics will throw in.
I also think with Owen Farrell, he wouldn't even say yes if he didn't think he could do it, because he is so kind of single-minded, isn't he? And I think he probably knows his own body. And at this stage in your career, you look at what they did with Johnny Sexton to get him to a World Cup, Ireland this is, and actually with that experience in that position of being a playmaker, it's one of those positions where, ironically, your fitness, your match fitness, isn't as important as your mental fitness in the game. Almost, I think. If you look at somebody like Finn Russell, his decision making is way more powerful than his body in many ways. I'm not saying he's not in great shape. Can I just say clearly is.
Just one of those moments where I thought I'll just leave 2 or 3 seconds here just for Gabby to get herself out of this.
The other big news, and the athletic season kind of is up and running, and we spoke to Michael Johnson about Grand Slam track, which was about to do its third of the 4 meets that he had planned when we spoke to him. But the big news in the last week was that we've discussed here that LA, the 4th Grand Slam track, was cancelled. But now stories emerging, which in the Times yesterday, that a lot of the participants, the athletes, are still owed up to millions of pounds accumulatively of fees, which is really worrying for obviously the event itself, but for the athletes involved, and just for the credibility of the event.
Yeah, it feels like it has been a bit of a battle all the way through this, doesn't it? Michael was fascinating to talk to when he came on the pod. I mean, Grand Slam Track have sent an email to all the athletes saying that Jamaica prize money would be paid before the end of July, the remaining payments by the end of September. We did contact Grand Slam Track for a response. They declined to comment as well. It's tough, isn't it? It's tough. And it's a bit messy at the moment.
It's tough because you want people to be innovators. You want them to try new things. It's a sport that, definitely needed to kind of harness the attraction that it has during Olympic Games and the World Championships and try and do something with those superstars. And what he really wanted was pure racing. And that's what he got. I hope World Athletics can take a little kind of look and think, well, there was something here. Because obviously they're competing in the Diamond League, and then you've got the World Athletics events as well. And that's the problem with the sport, I think, is that it's so disenfranchised. There's so many different ways to do this, and there's no sense of people knowing what's going on where. And maybe they all come together. I mean, am I asking too much? All come together and think, right, what is in the best interest of the athletes? There was some really good stuff from Grand Slam Track. How can we harness that and bring MJ and what he was doing there on board? I don't know. It feels like... they tried something, and you've got to give them credit for trying.
Okay, catch up with all episodes of The Sports Agents on Global Player or wherever you get your podcast. Hit subscribe or follow. Don't forget to rate and review.
Next to Silverstone, ahead of this weekend's British Grand Prix, the biggest event in the F1 calendar for British fans, British racing icon and former World Championship winner Jenson Button will be in our studio, and the question everyone's asking, is Verstappen about to break his Red Bull contract? So ahead of the British Grand Prix, who better to chat to than Jenson Button, who has just been racing around global headquarters in a kart against Amanda Holden. Can you just explain?
That was a tough race, I have to say. I came away with a victory, but it was a well-fought race by both of us, I thought, but I'm happy to win. Yes, I'll take any victory.
I would imagine that's quite a difficult course, isn't it? Because the global building is very narrow with a lot of stairs.
I know. So we had to drive these little carts into lifts down and then back and then outside doing a couple of donuts.
You're lucky that lift worked.
Exactly. We needed a key, but it was great fun. Really good. We got to top it now, obviously.
Yeah, well, we'll get into the serious stuff in a moment. But first of all, keeping with the kind of entertainment theme, have you seen F1 the movie yet? The Brad Pitt, I think the second most expensive movie of all time, is it?
Yeah, I think it was something like, was it 300 million? I have. I went to the premiere in New York. And first of all, I love that there's so much support and love for F1 at the moment. This is a sport I've loved since I was 6 years old. To see it grow like it has over the last sort of 5 years is staggering, and makes me very happy to see so many people enjoy this sport. The movie itself, it was action packed. They got all the action right, which is the most important thing.
Did they? And that is because we all watch sports movies, don't we? And go, I'm not sure that doesn't look right to me, or that really is not a very good.
That's not good enough.
Yeah, always the way, right?
Not a good reenactment of something. Yeah, always.
Yeah, so no, I mean, they spent a lot of time with F1 over the years. I've seen them at many races on track, and obviously with the help from Lewis Hamilton. So yeah, it's really good, and I think it's going to get a lot of love. I think for F1 fans, but also for new people, bringing them into the sport.
You talk about what appears to be out there at the moment, this real love for the sport and this sort of explosion in interest and love for it. I don't want to go back over Drive to Survive and all of that, which has triggered
which gets mentioned in almost every episode of this podcast.
Yeah, it does. But has the current interest and the current love surprised you?
Not for me, no, because this has always been my sport. I think what that show did for Formula One is that it showed behind the scenes. You could see the personalities, which is what you need in a sport where we wear a crash helmet. So I think that was a big part of it, and why there was so much interest from around the world, especially in the States, as seeing these personalities that race at over 200 miles an hour. I think that we've all picked up on what is wanted from fans now and supporters of the sport. And I think every bit of coverage now around the sport is about the personal side of things. It's about the personality, it's about the adrenaline, the emotions that racing drivers go through, not just about the racing on track, which I think is really important.
Okay, let's talk about this weekend's British Grand Prix. And the first person I want to talk to you about is Lewis Hamilton, because you moved around a lot in your career. I think you drove for 7 teams. And obviously for him, this is a big move to Ferrari that so far has not produced what he would like, which is a podium finish. And he comes in as last year's champion at Silverstone. And there will be, huge numbers there who come to Silverstone for him and want to see him do well. Do you get kind of the frustration that he must be feeling now, that things aren't moving in the direction that he wants?
I think initially with the team, he found it a little bit difficult to find the pace. But then in China, in the sprint qualifying and the sprint race, he obviously put it on pole and he won the race. And that was a strength of Ferrari in the shorter races. They were stronger, from what I've heard, because of the fuel levels, lighter fuel. It really worked better for the car. They could get the car close to the ground. So it was in its element. Whereas in a full-length race, they're struggling with it a little bit more, with the balance of the car. So as a team, they're obviously not quite there, fighting for wins. But also Lewis, I think, yes, it's tricky when you leave a team like Mercedes that you spent so many years winning titles with, and you've developed this car around your driving style. And then you jump in something that's completely different. It's also racing for a team in a different country that speak a different language. So it does take time. He's not a spring chicken anymore. He's still a lot younger than I am, but he's 40 now. And it is a little bit more difficult to learn at that age. It does take longer. But, even if he's a tenth slower than he was 5 years ago, he's still one of the best in the world and one of the quickest in the world. It's still Lewis Hamilton. So This is a perfect weekend for him to get the best out of the car and of himself. In front of the British fans, he always comes alive at this race. And for a driver like Lewis, the British Grand Prix is everything.
What did you find the hardest when you moved to a new team? And who is the most important person to connect with when you move to a new team?
Your engineer. The driver-engineer relationship is the most important. I think when you move teams, it takes a while to get that rapport between your engineer and yourself, and understanding, because every driver explains what the car is doing in a different way, and it takes it takes a bit of time to really get a good understanding between you two.
Do you need to go for a beer with them?
Yeah, well, there's that, but also, it's spending a bit of time with them out of the car. You're always going to have slight issues, communication issues, even if it's the same language. But I think it's making sure that you're open and you talk about them is a big thing. Yes, where a lot of racing drivers, we probably don't, and engineers don't ask enough questions of the drivers.
Well, Hamilton's quote, he says, "I'm constantly battling the engineers." That language seems quite robust, doesn't it? That doesn't point to harmony.
Yeah, exactly. And you're right. Maybe he does need to go for a beer with them, whether he drinks or not. Just spending a bit of time away from a racetrack, I think, is key, and away from the factory. But Lewis he's been there, done that. He knows what he's doing. So it will happen for him once he gets that good understanding between himself and his engineer. He's not suddenly, slow. He's still Lewis Hamilton, a 7-time world champion. So he will be competitive. It's just taking more time than he probably wanted.
When you move from one team to, this is obviously from someone who's never sat in an F1 car and doesn't understand technology very well. When you move from one team to another and sit in a new car for the first time, is it like driving again for the first time? Is it that different?
No, definitely not.
So are the differences really subtle? They are,
but it's also the car would be set up slightly differently. It would feel slightly different. Maybe you can't. We call it combining. So basically, when you're braking and turning in, some cars are very good at that. Some cars aren't, because you'll lock the inside tire. So basically, you just slide off the road. And this was one of the problems that Daniel Ricciardo had when he left Red Bull and he went through the Renault route and then into the McLaren. He couldn't drive those cars because you couldn't combine like you could in the Red Bull. Right. He was this superstar in a Red Bull, and then he just couldn't get it together in a McLaren. He hadn't lost his talent. He just didn't find a car that really he could drive to the maximum. So that's the thing. It's finding the nuances of the car and working around them. And it might even take a year of development and the new 2026 car for Lewis to feel 100% comfortable in this.
But you can't test drive them, can you? You can't go, oh, I'm not going to move. This is a huge move. And we're, at the moment, Verstappen, all the talk about him going to Mercedes. The same thing potentially could happen to him, right? If he's moving from a car that is absolutely perfect for him. How does he know that car's going to work? You
have the simulator, which the drivers do quite a bit of work in the simulator, but it's still not real life. So when you get on the circuit, it's always a little bit different. And yeah, you get 1.5 days of testing before the start of the season, and that's it. That's all you get before you rock up at the first race. And even for a driver that's been with a team for many years, getting into the new car of that team, it's difficult, let alone moving teams. So yeah, someone like Max thinking about moving to Mercedes, it's exciting for him. It's exciting for all of us watching that are fans of the sport. But is it going to give him what he needs? This team, Red Bull, have been around him for years. They've developed this car around him. As you can see, no one else can drive the Red Bull. Nobody can drive the Red Bull. He'll qualify on pole and his teammate will be 18th. I've never seen anything like it. So yes, when you move to a new team, is he going to have that? I don't know, and it's going to take him a while to get to grips with the new car. The regulations do change a lot next year. We have a chassis change. We also have aero change. We have also an engine change, power unit change. So it's a lot to take on board. Personally, I'd want to be with the team that I've been with for years, because there's so much more to learn. You need the base of that team.
Would there be benefits to Red Bull then if he moved? in that all of a sudden they lose the one driver that the car is set up for and maybe become a stronger team?
Well, they wouldn't, because they'd have to re-engineer the car to work for other drivers. And the thing is with the Red Bull, the way Adrian Newey always designs a car is that he gets as much downforce on the car as possible. And to do that, you have to have a lot of front end, because you have the front wing at maximum, basically, and that gives the front end downforce. It also gives the rear end downforce. But that is a really difficult car to drive, because it means that it's very on the nose, which means you slide the rear a lot. And Max can drive it like that. Other drivers can't. You'll see them spinning off. So they'll take front wing out of the car, which makes it more drivable, but then it's slower. So that's the predicament that most drivers find themselves in when they drive a Red Bull.
And obviously there are other things going on behind the scenes in terms of this move, aren't there? And there was obviously discord within the camp at the end of last season as well. So there's personalities that are at play here. And Max and George Russell got a lot of beef as well. Could they ever be a pairing?
I would love to see it. Whether it would happen or not, I don't know. But, from my point of view as a fan of the sport and also doing TV work, yes, we want to see that. We want to see that within a team. It's Alain Prost, Ayrton Senna. Do you know what I mean? So I am a big fan of both of them. I think they're both very skilled. I feel for George a little bit, because everyone's saying if Max does go to Mercedes, it'll be George that's leaving. But the guy's at the top of his game. He's an exceptional talent, works hard. When he was up against Lewis, he beat Lewis at moments in time. And to do that, I know how difficult that is. So it's a real strange situation we find ourselves in, of trying to replace an amazing driver with another amazing driver at Mercedes. So if they were teammates, yeah, I think it'd be great for us. Very difficult for Toto, though.
But why would he have to leave? Because the theory is, I mean, you mentioned Prost and Senna when they were together, but the theory being you can't have two number ones.
I think in the sport you need two very good drivers now. If you want to win a Constructors' Championship, you look at McLaren at the moment. Oscar, Lando, they're both scoring big points. Yeah, they have the best car, but they're not really making big mistakes. Obviously, Canada for Lando was not such a good weekend, crashing with his teammate. But that's going to happen when you're both fighting at the front. It doesn't happen very often, and they're always pulling in big points. So you need that. They're so far in front of the championship. Even though Max has put in some great results, his teammates have scored hardly any points. So you need both drivers to be fighting for the World Championship. You need to give two drivers the opportunity. These guys have worked their whole life to get to Formula One. You need to give them that equal opportunity.
Did you want a teammate who you were friendly with and work together as a team, or did you prefer a teammate who was going to be up there competing with you, who, it was more of a rivalry? Which did you prefer?
I wanted everything. I wanted, Rubens Barrichello, for example, when I won the World Championship in 2009. He was extremely quick, but he was also very good at setting up a car. He was very good at engineering a car, which helped me. At the end of that year, for me, the exciting thing was to go to a team like McLaren and race alongside Lewis Hamilton, because that's when you really judge yourself, when you're racing against the best in the world. So I would always want the most competitive teammate. One, because it pushes you, but also if you beat that driver, you're the best at that moment in time. And that's one of the best things ever. Probably more than winning a world championship, winning a race knowing that you beat Lewis Hamilton in the same car.
Let's talk about Silverstone and how special it is. It's the 75th anniversary of Silverstone hosting the first Formula One World Championship Grand Prix, which was held in 1950. Take us back, not to then, obviously, you've mentioned your age. Take us back through your memories and where it kind of ranked in your career highlights racing there.
Well, the first time I went to Silverstone was 1992, camping with my dad in a little caravan. And that was, an amazing memory, watching these cars drive through Maggots and Beckett's, which is a fast-flowing section of the track, just being blown away. And then I got to drive in 2000, my first year in Formula One, for Williams, and finishing fifth, overtaking Michael Schumacher at turn one at the start of the race, and David Coulthard won the race, so we partied hard after that one. That for me is one of my best memories of racing at Silverstone. I've never stood on the podium at the British Grand Prix. I've won Monaco, I've won the World Championship, 15 Grand Prix victories, never been on the podium at the British Grand Prix, which hurts. That's the one thing that really hurts, because the support you get as a British driver, not just if you win, but also just being on the grid, there's so much support. And, that's one thing I regret. And one thing I'm definitely jealous of Lewis, of winning how many times he has the British Grand Prix. The first time I actually stood on the podium was when I awarded Lewis didn't award him his trophy, but I interviewed Lewis when he won the race in 2018, I think.
Do you only feel that support when you're out of the car, though?
On the way to the grid, you see the fans, you feel it, and after the race as well when you cross the line. But when you're racing, yeah, you are fully focused. You see nothing outside the white lines of the track.
Yeah.
And British hopes this weekend. We've already kind of discussed George, obviously Lando in there, as we've discussed Lewis. For a team like Williams as well, this is obviously a big moment. You're, I know, an ambassador for Williams. So do you see British success this weekend across the weekend?
It's a big weekend for British motorsport. 3 exceptional drivers. For me, it's the best 3 drivers I can remember. British drivers in the sport. I'm sure people disagree, but that's my feelings of when I've been racing. All have won races, all capable of winning a world championship. And Lewis's win last year was just incredible, and the crowd went crazy. This year it's a little bit more difficult. You'd think that Lando has the best chance. Don't count Lewis out, and Mercedes might be on a good weekend, and we might see George up there as well. So 3 British drivers that could be on the podium for the British Grand Prix. Yes, Williams. I've loved seeing their progress over the last couple of years, and to see them fighting for sort of 5th, 4th, 6th position in races. This is a massive step for them, especially coming into the British Grand Prix. So I really do hope they'll have a good race with Alex and Carlos.
They're 5th out of 10th, I think, aren't they, in the constructors at the moment?
Which is a big step forward.
How hard is it to get, as a team, to get yourself back when you fall so far?
It's tricky because it's not like there's been a regulation change either. It's to make the step that they've made is extraordinary. The only other team that's done it over the last few years is McLaren. Made such a big step. Obviously, McLaren has made the step to winning races, and Williams hasn't yet. But to be scoring points in pretty much every race and getting double points finishes, this is great for the team. Austria last weekend was a tough one. They were running in 6th with Alex, and he had a failure, which hurts a lot. But it does mean that they're all just gunning for a great race at the British Grand Prix. This one, it feels like double points for a British team.
We've discussed this before on the podcast. We wonder what you might think of a novel idea that one race every season should be the same car, effectively. And it's a bit like, the horses in the modern pentathlon at the Olympics, where they just get given a horse, right? So you just turn up and you pick your keys up. You pick your keys up. Do you have keys? You pick your keys up and you walk over to your car.
Not for a horse.
No, I get that. So basically you're driving blind, effectively, a car that you've never driven before. And then maybe we'd find out who really is the best driver.
It depends on how the car's set up. That's the thing. It's a tricky one, and you're never going to get it. So,
so
you're never going to get it.
So both of you shut up.
and that's kind of what F1's about. It's not just about the driver. It's a team sport. You've got 1,000 people in pretty much every team plus working and developing these cars, and that's what's exciting as well. It's the technology that they're pushing and striving to improve.
As a driver, would you not sometimes think, if you were in a car that you thought, this car's not been well put together, if you put me in that car, of course I'd win the bloody British Grand Prix.
Of course you might think like that, but you can go and race in something else if you want. Do you know what I mean? But then you got in other categories, you've got IndyCar, which are supposedly the same car, but there are definitely teams that are better at developing that car. NASCAR, it's supposed to be a stock car, and there's a massive difference from the car that wins to the car that finished 35th. So they're never the same anyway. It matters who runs the team. So it's the team effort, and that's what's awesome about this sport.
Speaking of racing, one of the last times I interviewed you, you challenged me to a triathlon, but I didn't hear from you again. So were you running scared or what?
I was waiting on the start line.
Well, must have been at different start lines.
Are you still doing?
I had your speedos ready and everything for you.
No, I'm not. I'm not still doing Ironman.
No, not
Gabby.
you, Chappers.
No.
I
Sorry.
definitely know you're not still doing, or ever have done an Ironman. Are you still doing triathlons and Ironman and all that?
No.
No.
I would love to be, but life's a bit busy at the moment. You know, I'm doing a lot of stuff around F1. I'm also still racing and endurance racing. And I've got 2 kids now, so yeah, I feel like I'm doing a triathlon and Ironman every day, but I'm not.
You think back to those simple heady days where you could go out and train for 5 hours.
Yeah, I remember back to being an F1 driver, and I was so spoiled. All I had to do was drive a racing car for a living. I mean, and I thought that was tough. I thought, oh, the schedule's so busy. And everything
you wouldn't have had to. You wouldn't have had to do anything, would you? You wouldn't have had to book travel, hotels, ever think of what you're eating. It would have all have just been there.
Done.
Yeah, I never paid a bill, and I met my wife, and we got married, and she's like, "What? You don't know how to pay a bill?" It's like, no. So yeah, they say when you leave F1, you leave at the age you got into F1. And I think that's correct. I got into F1 at 20 and I left at 20. So I've had a lot to learn in life. But
what surprised you most about normal life?
About life?
The bins?
I definitely put the bins out. For me, it's how much time I spend booking stuff. I spend my whole life on my computer booking stuff. Like whether it's, I do have a personal assistant, so I'm not going to complain too much. But I still book my flights. I don't trust anyone to book my flights, so I book on my flights. So I'm not very good at it. So I keep getting it wrong, and I have to go back. And anyway, so yeah, it's mostly booking the travel that.
Life admin. Hey,
and dad cabs. Dad cabs. Are you doing a lot?
Well, they're
around?
They're 4 and 5, 4 and 5 at the moment. So that's probably the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life is have children. Not that I had them, but. It's the most amazing moment in time, spending time with your kids, but also the toughest. And, you know, people say, oh, winning the World Championship must be the best thing you've ever done. It's like, no, it's having kids, and they are awesome. But they're tough, aren't they? Tough cookies, but amazing at the same time.
Well, a big smile on your face says I think you've got the balance right, and it seems that life is pretty good at the moment. So I really appreciate you coming in and spending time with us today.
Nice to see you, Jenson.
What must be a jam-packed weekend for you.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, lovely speaking to you.
So let's talk about McLaren, the great success since you took over. And last year you won your first Constructors' Championship in 26 years. How much did you have to convince everybody last season, psychologically, you being the leader, that you could get over that hurdle? Because it doesn't matter what the sport is, the longer you don't win something, everyone goes, well, can they do it? You know, do they? Everyone uses that B word, don't they? Are they going to bottle it again? Do they believe they can do it? What was your part in all that?
I don't think we had Constructors' Championship in mind last year. I think Lando had gone a long time with not having won a race, so I think it was kind of like it'd be great if we could get Lando his first win. Be great if we can get Oscar his first win, and we'd like to finish top 3 in the championship. I think that's kind of where we entered the season. Even after we won in Miami, it was like, all right, we've got that win. Now when are we going to get our next one? For me, it wasn't really till mid-season that I thought, we got a shot here. Pete Pedromo, our head of Aero, he called it early on. He went into the season going, there's no reason why we can't fight for the championship. I thought that was a bit optimistic. So it really wasn't until mid-year where we really hit a groove that we thought, game on. But we went into Miami this year the same amount of points ahead of Red Bull that we were behind them last year, and that we ended up winning. They finished 3rd, so even though we were winning in Miami and they finished 3rd, there's a long way to go in the season. We see how quickly the sport can change. We're not even to the halfway mark. So while I think the Drivers' Championship has 5 drivers in it, in my opinion, 2 of which are ours, but Max is not far behind. George is right behind him, and I don't think Leclerc's out of the game. Hopefully in a few more races, that 5 will become 4 and 3. And, you know, for us, a dream scenario would be Oscar and Lando going into Abu Dhabi and may the best man win.
So are you saying that we in the media make more of the Constructors' Championship than necessarily you are within the teams?
No, for us, they're both equally as important. You know, people ask us, do you prioritize one or the other? But if you can finish first and second in the Drivers' Championship, you're going to win the Constructors. So we want to finish first and second in the Drivers' Championship. We want Oscar and Lando to decide the order. That's between them. Our goal is to give them equal equipment, equal opportunity, and let them race it out, which is exactly what's happened all year long. I think we saw an epic battle in Austria. It was awesome to see. They raced each other hard. They raced each other clean. And it was nose to tail all race. And I think we're going to see more of that. You know, in Montreal, we had that incident that we knew was going to come. You know, we've always been saying that was a matter of when, not if. I'm kind of happy the way it played out because it was one driver's mistake. He put up his hand right away. Fortunately, it didn't hurt Oscar's race. Fortunately, it wasn't for the lead. Fortunately, it wasn't a turn one. They're both wiped out, and you're arguing the following week over whose fault it was. So in that sense, Lando owned it. Oscar understood mistakes happen, so it was a non-event. But there's going to be more of it. You're not going to put two racing drivers next to each other in the same team or not, race as hard as they're racing and not have incidents. So it's all about trust, teamwork, communication, and we couldn't have a better driver lineup. I've been saying that from day one.
You absolutely have. So you're saying at the moment that they both have equal priority, as it were. They're racing, as things stand, mano a mano, may the best man win.
100%.
Okay, as the manager of Oscar, how do you feel when you hear that, Mark?
Well, it's great to hear. I mean, you can see right at this point, they've both been driving brilliantly. Obviously, Oscar's come out of the gates this year pretty strong, to say the least. Obviously, having led the most laps, most wins, most poles. So that's a feather in his cap. But obviously, you need the equipment to do that. And that's what McLaren have provided him with. You know, and then when you've got someone like Zak, who's, you know, commercially bringing the partners into the team. So that's super exciting for the team. They've come a long way from you know, the last few years where it was a challenging phase, and that's what happens in sport, football clubs, you know, whatever side of the Atlantic, and Formula One as well. There's a bit of ebbing and flowing, but just the inertia behind the team now, the drivers know that as well. You know, it's very challenging to put yourself in this situation, and as Zak said, you know, the complacency just cannot set in at all. You know, the margins are so tight. But of course, you know, Oscar's incredibly proud of how he's been driving up to this point, and there's a long way to go in the season. I think there's going to be some tremendous racing between the pair of them. Max is still there. You know, we've got some weather around the weekend, some rain potentially. So, like, that's just literally the cat among. There's a lot of pigeons here in Trafalgar Square, so that will put the cat amongst the pigeons. And so, long way to go, and they're both driving brilliantly. And yeah, as Zak said, it's up to them to sort out who's going to lift the big trophy.
Give us a little bit of an insight, if you would, into Oscar's character. What is he like?
Well, he's, I think, pretty hard to read for people on the outside. Obviously, he's incredibly calm. I think we can see that component, but I think that I think people shouldn't confuse that calmness with him not having big dreams and big desires. And he's a very big competitor. You know, I think when the helmet goes on, there's lots of people in sport where we talk about that white line fever, where you've got this little, you know, gentle teddy bear. Not that Oscar's the teddy bear, but there's some sports people that just cross that white line and they turn into someone different. I think Oscar has a lot of belief in himself. That's important. He always has done. Obviously, he had an exceptional junior career, winning lots of championships, and now arrived in Formula One, even winning quite early in his career, which was, you know, he's got to do that with his people, you know, and get the engineers to believe in the journey that he's taken them on as well, which is really, really positive to see that. So ultimately, he's, you know, he's not one for the limelight, let's say. I think he's very, you know, he's not shy. He just wants to race, and he loves racing, competing, and of course, he loves representing McLaren week in, week out. That's been obvious from the off. So yeah, he's Australian, loves representing Australia, of course. You know, there's going to be some hopefully a few Aussie fans out there this weekend too. Of course, it'll be overwhelmingly British. But I think when I raced here, this was my second home race. I always had a tremendous reception from the British fans. Of course, they wanted Jenson and Lewis to win when I was racing. But when they couldn't win, they normally fell to the other, Commonwealth driver, I suppose. So Oscar, hopefully, can have a good weekend in Silverstone as well.
Well, I've been lucky enough to be in Australia quite a few times for Sporting Way. I can imagine how they're getting behind him down there. Because, a sportsman or woman doing well in Australia is a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also in individual sports, that's another layer when you're doing something individually. Whether, we had, of course, Greg Norman, we had Paddy Rafter, Leighton Hewitt in tennis, myself and Daniel or whatever. So you see that it's a long way to come from Australia to succeed overseas. I think that the European drivers, in some ways, it is actually easier Monday to Friday to have your loved ones and your family around you, particularly early in your career. We don't have that luxury, and that's not an excuse. It's just the way it is. Geographically, it's another test that you have to, line yourself up for. So there's been a lot of, it's a great saying. It's a long way to come and go home with your tail between your legs, So you want to make sure it counts. You can't just go around the corner and go home and have dinner with mum because she's not here. So you want to really make your presence felt. And, that's something that Australia now, again, fully behind Oscar. The event this year was extraordinary. And, yeah, we've got good plans for the event next year with Oscar. So who knows if he's there, in what capacity, if he's managed to do something really extraordinary this year. But the fans have been awesome.
Zach, give us an appreciation of Oscar and his character as a team principal at McLaren.
First of all, he's awesome. And what you see is what you get. He just kind of gets on with it. I think he's got unbelievable talent, and that he's got huge passion in the race car, but no emotion. And I always say, there's a fine line between emotion and passion, but, emotion's not a good state to be in a race car, and he has none of that. In the race car, outside the race car, he's very, very technical. He's very kind of fact-based, and he gets on with it. And he's, the part that I've started to see as I gotten to know him better, he's very witty. He's a funny guy, so as Mark said, he's not shy. He just kind of gets on with it, and he's just very focused on racing. Another guy that I've been around a lot that's very similar, and that is Fernando Alonso. And if you think about his age relative to competing in Formula One, the reason he's had such a long, great career is it's just all he does. He's just racing. And that's all that's on Oscar's mind. And if you look at the areas that he needed to improve upon in his third year, he's killed it, right? It was qualifying last year, put yourself in a better position for the start of the race. And his qualifying's been amazing. His Fridays have been amazing. He never makes mistakes. He's not flustered. We've had to revise our coaching to him. When he started, it was like, listen to your manager. He's won 9 more Grand Prix than you. And then they started, listen to your manager. He's won 7 more Grand Prix than you. And then, soon he's going to be like, well, I've now won more Grand Prix than Mark. Now what?
That's not in question. That's not in question. The least he listens to me, the better. But yeah, absolutely. No, it's extraordinary to have that many victories so far, obviously in his career. And I think we can all agree that obviously he's going to have a solid career. But how extraordinary that's in Oscar's hands. But yeah, no, he does his talking on the track. He doesn't do his talking, in terms of he really is analytical about obviously what he talks about and how he goes. Say what you want, maybe you got to back it up on track. And he really is, and I think that with the people in his corner as well, in terms of, with his engineers and the people and the team, it's like, just, I would like this, I'd like that. Okay, you got that? Bang, goes out and does it. So he's, yeah, it's quite cool to watch from the outside.
But in terms of being quite quiet off the track, that will come, won't it, as he matures, as he gets older? So that's nothing that you have to fast forward.
Naturally, any elite sports person in any sport, you can't, obviously, look at someone like Daniel. His brand was so big. Daniel was a big brand, and in conjunction with McLaren, who did a great job with, and they do a great job with branding. Obviously, clearly they're awesome at that. And then you have, someone like Daniel in the sport who's massive. And then obviously you have Oscar, who's just starting his career, as did Lewis, as did Fernando, as Zak touched, as did Daniel, as did all these bigger brands. They've got to start somewhere. And you can't just parachute into that same point where, where the other very experienced campaigners have gone on that journey in their career. So someone like Roger Federer, classic case. 2 years in compared to at the end of his career, it's a different. It's
called growing up, isn't it?
Different conversation. Yeah.
What does he like to do off the track? I mean, I take the point, as Zak said, he likes to race. But is there a way that he relaxes? Is there something he likes to do?
He's pretty horizontal. He's pretty horizontal. Likes his sim. He has a bit of, I think he mucks around on the sim a little bit. He's likes his sport. He likes watching sport. He definitely is into that. Watches basketball in the US and loves his Australian rules footy and different. Loves his cricket. So he'll be watching, obviously, the next few months. Zak hates cricket. Absolutely hates it.
Haven't got that far yet to convince him.
Not hates it, but he's like, how can this is so boring.
I just don't understand.
He doesn't understand. 5 days, how's that possible?
It's a better version of baseball, Zak. That's what it is.
No, please don't compare to baseball. That's a proper sport.
Oscar loves his sport. He really does watch his sport. He's a bit of a, he really enjoys that. But I think now people have got to understand their scheduling as well. Like, he's just having the downtime to actually have a bit of a pit stop. So again, that's something that he's learning, what he likes to do, what he doesn't like to do. Most things that Oscar picks up, whether it's new sports, whatever he does, frustratingly, he's pretty handy at most things, like most of these guys are. So you put him on a cycle bike, you do that, it's like, yeah, mate, you look technically pretty slick on that. Oh, okay, no worries. Okay, yeah. So he can pick things up pretty quick.
So how does his characteristics and personality compare with Lando then? Because you're in this remarkable position where the two of them are neck and neck going for the title.
It's great. They're very complementary. They're similar in many ways and also not. But I think, you wouldn't want two Zaks in a team or two Marks in a team or two Oscars in a team. I think actually having them be complementary and different personalities brings out the best in both of them. They learn from each other a lot, so I think that's been great for them individually and the team. Obviously, Lando's been in the sport longer, so he's got kind of a head start in that sense. And Lando is just a different personality, a bit more extroverted. He wasn't always like that, Lando. He also too was quiet, so you see how much he's grown over the years. They have a tremendous amount of respect for each other. And you can tell when you have drivers around each other if there's some tension in the air, and there isn't any. And that's not to be mistaken for they both want to beat each other really bad, because when you come in, the first thing you do is you look at where your teammate is. That's just inevitable in any form of motorsport. But they've got a huge amount of respect for each other, and you can see that when they're together. In debriefs, there's not, you used to, in the good old days, be, I'm flat through that corner, and then you find out you're not because the driver's they don't do any of that stuff. I think they realize the best chance they have to win is to try and separate both of them from the competition, and then they've got one guy to beat each other versus 19. So they're working well together, and that's why we've got them both signed up long term. And with all this driver drama that's going on, we can just sit back and watch the movie like everybody else.
Mark, you've been in this business a long time in many different parts of this business. How unusual is this situation, though, where there are not at the moment team orders, where there's not clearly a number one and a number two? Because you would have seen it so many times. The number two goes, I had to pull over and let the number one go through.
Yeah.
How unusual is this?
I mean, it's happened before. I mean, you had it with Nico and Lewis, and obviously, back in the day with McLaren drivers. So there has been a natural blending of someone that just can't keep up with a fight, obviously, so then you have this natural inertia where the other driver can't go deep into the season. When that's not the case, this is the scenario you find yourself in. You've got two actually can go, they're competitive on all circuits, obviously give an equal opportunity to do the business, then obviously can go deeper into the season. So I think it doesn't happen all the time, clearly, but it has happened, and clearly it takes some management from the team to understand how that, it's just equal and fair, and that as long as the two boys know they're getting a fair crack at it, that's all you can do. That's the most important thing that they can do there. And ultimately, it'll be won and lost. We don't know when it's going to be won and lost, or as Zak said, there's other people still at the party at the moment. So you can never discount that, particularly someone of Max Verstappen's caliber. So. Great for the fans. I think the race in Austria was, like Zak touched on, they've got a race. To race soft is like, it's weird because, when you've got someone in front of you, he's braking on the limit. He's just braking on the limit. So you have to try and outbrake him. It's all, you've got to be doing something that's pretty tricky to do. Obviously, you saw like Oscar with Charles Leclerc at Azerbaijan last year. That was a pretty unbelievable move, and that can happen. That's that hard racing. Yes, it is. So you've got to find the sweet spot between both of them, and they're working that out right now. Week in, week out. Obviously, we've had, Lando own Canada, fine, but like I think for the fans and for the teams, or for this team, obviously, I think it's good that they can let them crack on, and it's not always going to be like that because you're going to have other people in. I think they've only raced each other twice, and we've done 12 races, so it shows you that it won't always even happen on track like that.
Well, just to fill everybody in, I'm sure everyone knows, but those listening might not. Piastri 15 points ahead of Norris now, who's 46 ahead of Verstappen. They're racing each other fairly now. Is there a situation later in the season when A is clearly ahead of B where team orders might come into things? Is that just a practical reality?
Yeah, if. I don't think it's going to end up being that way, because it even wasn't last year when we asked Oscar at the very end of the season to support Lando. That was a tough decision because Oscar was never out of the game. And so someone's going to have to be out of the game for us to make that decision. It's not what we want. We want to see them both race, for it all the way through Abu Dhabi. But if there does become a point where it makes sense and the drivers agree, and that's what we had last year. What was great is last year Oscar helped Lando in Brazil, and then Lando repaid the favor in Qatar. So they're very aware of what's in the best interest of the team and, of course, themselves. And we're very aware of that. So we were pretty uncomfortable last year when we all kind of got around, hey, if Lando's going to have any chance, can we help? Fortunately, it was only a couple races. And the ironic thing is we made that decision in Baku, and then Oscar goes out and wins Baku, which just shows you why, we really need someone to be mathematically out of it. And with how things are going, I don't see that being the case.
So Oscar's quite happy with that. You've had conversations about that. There might be times you have to support Lando if that's the reality of his trying to win the title because you can't.
Oh, I don't see that happening this year.
But one day down the line, he knows that,
it's happened.
My question is, any driver knows that within the team.
Both drivers know that.
Yeah,
both drivers know if one driver gets to a point where they're mathematically ahead, whether it's Lando or Oscar, they'll become reluctantly but professionally support the other. But as Mark said, I definitely don't see that happening, and it barely happened last year. And we weren't very comfortable with it, but everyone was aligned around it, and it was only for a short period.
Let's talk about Silverstone this weekend, because Lando said that he'd got a little bit of an inkling of what it was like to be Harry Kane going into a major championship and all the pressure that was on, obviously, the England football team that is on him. How is he responding to that level of expectation, do you think?
I think anytime you have a home race, of course, it's a little extra special. No different than when, we landed at the first race of the year in Australia and all you saw was Oscar everywhere, which is awesome. So Oscar had as many cheers here yesterday as Lando, which is awesome because I think, Oscar loves Silverstone as well. He goes very well around here. But I think anytime you're in a home race, it's the same for me when we go to the U.S., I kind of want to win Austin or Miami or Vegas, maybe a little bit more than another Grand Prix. Because for me, it feels like a home Grand Prix. But I think both our boys are going to be right at the sharp end of the field. It's a circuit our car's good at. Oscar should have won this race last year. Unfortunately, we made some mistakes because he was gone. And we just made some errors there. But, we learned from those, and so we're a smarter team today than we were yesterday, and that's all you can do. Mistakes happen, and I always say around the factory, just don't make the same mistake twice. But we should have won this race last year. Oscar was a mile ahead of everyone, and the conditions were tricky, so you can make mistakes. It was a tricky situation, but we'll give it another go this year.
Mark, what makes Silverstone what it is?
Oh, it's a magnificent circuit. Absolutely magnificent track. It's fast. It rewards the brave. You've got to be on top of your car. Technically, you've got to really put it up on its tippy toes. And you think that you're on the limit, and then there's always a little bit more there. Zak's a racer too. He knows what that middle sector looks like. Copse, Maggots, Beckett's down to Stowe, which I believe Lando's got a corner at this year. So that'll be awesome to see the car swing into there. But also the fans. I think for me, when I was, again, even as a young boy, I remember watching, Mansell and Piquet, race here and all those years ago back on my TV in Australia. So the British fans have always supported the British Grand Prix, every single year, and there was a few years, obviously Donington, 93 rides with big crowds there. So wherever the race has been, Brands Hatch before that, it's such a knowledgeable crowd. The industry's here. There's so many amazing legends that have been, that have competed here. All the legends have raced in the UK. So, and it's stable on the calendar. You have to have a British Grand Prix, in my opinion. It's such a, it's the rock bed of our sport. Or a lot of the teams are based here. The fans are absolutely extraordinary. And then what blows me away, I've had a lot of Aussie fans come over to this race, and when the weather is absolutely shocking, they still turn up. It's like the Australians are a bit soft with the weather. It's like, I might watch it on TV today, mate. And it's like, these guys, they are the best in the world. Whether rain, hail or shine, they will go. So I always take my hat off to how loyal the fans are to our sport, which is awesome to watch.
Yeah, Silverstone or Glastonbury, doesn't matter. The weather bad, they're still there. You just mentioned it there. So talk about what's happening at Stowe Corner, Lando's stand. Tell everybody what that is and where the impetus came from for that.
Yeah, I'm not sure where it started from in Lando's world, but there'll be a stand that's all Landoed out, which is very, very cool, and I think gives drivers a little bit of a little extra energy. You always find that little half a tenth because you're home race, so the cheers are a little bit louder. So we're excited. It's a home race for us. We haven't won this race since 2008. Last time with Lewis. It's an iconic Grand Prix for me. Silverstone, COTA, Australia. They get the biggest sets of fans and very, very knowledgeable, as Mark said. 400,000 or 500,000 people over the course of the weekend, and that brings a lot of energy to everybody when you see the size of the show that we put on.
It was interesting that Jenson Button admitted. He told us how gutted he was he'd never been on the podium, even though he won a world title. So from all the British drivers you drove against, and obviously lots of them won it, but how desperately they wanted to do at Silverstone.
Absolutely, and Jenson and I joked about it for our whole careers because he wasn't lucky enough to get a good result in Silverstone, never on the podium, but he won the Australian Grand Prix twice, which really pissed me off. So I won this race twice, and I was never on the podium in Australia. So mate, if we could have traded one of our wins either way. So for me not to have a good result in Australia was frustrating, and JB was another one here. He just never really clicked for him. But I remember Lewis's, the last McLaren win here in 2008. That was an extraordinary one of Lewis's. I mean, obviously he's won a few races, over 100, but that was one of his best drives ever. So. Yeah, of course, I want to win it. George is going to be competitive. Lewis, who knows? Last year, Lewis, it was a great result for him too here with mixed conditions. So, there were a lot of Union Jacks out there, and even of course, as an Australian, you can't help but admire the intensity that the fans bring and the energy the race has. It's second to none, really. It's impressive.
Well, particularly because it's celebrating 75 years of Formula One racing this year. And actually, if people look at all the newspapers online, there's some fabulous old photographs, aren't there? I think there were 4 cars in the first race or whatever. What is I think you mentioned it, would 87 be your best memory that you didn't drive in, the famous Mansell duel? Would that be it?
Probably, yeah. That was down to, actually, where Lando's got down to Stowe. They had a big fight down into that corner. But I always used to love watch Alain Prost race because waking up at 2 a.m. in the morning in Australia, I used to go to bed. My dad used to wake me back up because it was obviously, getting ready for school the next day, Monday. And because Mum was in charge of getting me to school, which was always a bad job to have. Dad had gone to work, but he'd wake me up at 2 a.m. And I'm like, I want to follow Alain Prost because his chances of finishing races was very, very high. I didn't want to follow a driver that would always be out early. So it's like Dad said, you've got to go to bed when your favourite driver's here. So Prost my man, because I love watching Alain race. So, so lots of memories of, a lot of McLaren success at Silverstone through that era. But also I think when Senna got a lift back with Nigel, I think the Mansell Mania, for me as a youngster too, watching that, that was unbelievable, track invasions and all the rest of it, which of course won't happen, these days. But seeing those track invasions again, that just shows you what the sport meant to the people and what Nigel meant to the British fans as a world champion. And that was obviously off the charts as well. From a young boy watching in Australia, I love watching that.
There's a photograph of him giving a lift in the paper. I mean, you have to look at it twice and go, oh yeah, there are 2 people actually. There's one on the cockpit. What would your memories be of Silverstone growing up? I mean, you raced a lot yourself, but what would it mean to you growing up?
I mean, it's amazing. It's to me, it's kind of Monaco level type of excitement. I think the 87 Nigel race, I actually have that car and I'm driving it this weekend in Silverstone. So I'm maybe a bit weird. I'm in a Williams, but we're doing they've got some historic Formula One cars going out. I was always a Nigel Mansell fan. The other one would probably be 2001 when Mika made an awesome pass on Schumi. Around the outside, going into the Maggots-Beckett's complex. I was a massive Mika Hakkinen fan, still am. So it's pretty cool that he's here joining us this weekend and here today. Of course, that's Senna, Mansell. I remember Mark's big win when he had a car that wasn't of the same recent updates as his competitor and had an awesome race. I remember that race. I was at that race, the Lewis race in 08. I mean, I think the British Grand Prix put together a lot, but if I had to pick one, because it would be the 87, because first of all, I'm still a fan to this day. Some of my other team bosses somehow think that's a weakness. I think that's a positive and a benefit, because I remember the first Grand Prix I went to, the impression it made on me. So I feel part of my responsibility at McLaren is to make sure that all of our great fans have access to our team. And I hope that everyone takes that same memory from today or whenever you're at the race, when you meet Oscar, you meet Lando, you see a car, and then 20, 30 years from now, it's like, I remember when I was in Trafalgar Square and I met Oscar, I met Lando, or whatever the case may be, because I remember 81 Long Beach Grand Prix like it was yesterday. I still have the race program. First racing driver I met was Eddie Cheever. I got his autograph. I just remember it like it was yesterday. And so I know the impression, because we all are here because we love sport, we love Formula One, and so we want you to be able to get as close to it as possible. And it can be challenging when you've got big groups and hundreds of millions of people, but fortunately in today's digital age, it allows us to do some things that I couldn't do when I was growing up. Now you have the ability to engage with Oscar and Lando that I couldn't engage with Ayrton Senna or Nigel Mansell back then. I had no mechanisms to do that.
We just got a couple of minutes to go, so I've got a couple more questions for you. Mark, obviously, as I say, you manage Oscar, but if you could say something to Lando about a British driver embracing the expectation of a home Grand Prix, what would it be?
Follow your team at home. That'd be good.
Because it's a different sort of pressure, as you said. It's completely different.
Well, it's just weird. Yeah, it's I think it's the build-up. I think it's the expectation that people. I think that everyone wants it so bad for you as well. Like, who are you ultimately doing it for? That's the thing. Like, there's 23 other races, which probably for Lando, of course, don't have. He won Monaco this year, which was an extraordinary performance. That's a big box ticked. Home Grand Prix is a big one, of course, and Zak mentioned some of the other classic circuits. So there is some, if you want to cherry pick some races, of course, that you'd like to win as a Grand Prix driver, they're certainly there. They're the historic events, and your home Grand Prix is certainly up there. So, I think that you can't press the throttle any harder. You can't, try and reinvent the wheel because it's your home race. Of course, he's a high caliber driver. He knows what he needs to do. But ultimately, it's going to be down to the key decisions. It's always down to, there could be 1 or 2 seconds on the weekend where you've got to make the right decisions. And that's, as we saw Zak test on last year, there was some, and that's the great thing about F1. You've got to make decisions, load the dice in your favour all the time to make the right one as often as possible. You do a lot more losing in this sport than winning. That's just how it is. It's a nasty beast like that. Lando's, he's never had more experience than today. So he's just got to lean on that and go out there and do the best job for his team.
Zak, let me just ask you one, if I may, about talking about great drivers and maybe people on the move. What was your reaction? I think you've talked about this week, about Max Verstappen maybe moving on.
Well, I'm a general believer of where there's smoke, there's fire. No one's kind of denying anything. If you said to Oscar and Lando or me, who's in the car at McLaren next year, it's 110% Lando and Oscar, and we all say it. So when you get into we've got a contract through 28, but yet no one's definitively saying, no, that's where I'm going to be. There's conversations clearly going on. I think Mercedes is a team on the rise. Red Bull at the moment has challenges. Doesn't mean that they can't fix those challenges, but Max in a Mercedes is pretty uncomfortable to think about because he's awesome and they're awesome and on the rise. So I think I'd rather him stay where he is. I think it would be a disaster for Red Bull if they lost Max, because if you look at how that's all going, you could almost question whether the AlphaTauri is a quicker car and Max is that special. So it's the fascinating part about Formula One. I'm glad we're able to watch and not participate in that, because it'd have to be an uncomfortable position for Red Bull management to be in, that, you know, their superstar driver, one of the best racing drivers in the world ever, who's clearly kind of carrying that car at the moment, could leave, and then what? And then, but I think that's one of the things Netflix has done a great job is, you know, unlike other sports where it's exclusively about the field of play, our field of play, there's a lot going on off the track, and I think that's one of the things that Netflix done, is shown how complex, political, drama, whatever you want to call it, our sport has. So there's a lot of different reasons why people love Formula One. Of course, we all love the competition on track. That's first and foremost. But then you like the drivers, you like the technology, you like the politics. It's big business, where most other sports, you're not really too interested what's going on in the in the back office, so to speak. So it's fascinating times. I think we're going to know here shortly. The one thing I've learned with Formula One is expect the unexpected. So there could be something going on that none of us even know about.
Mark, I just want to finish with this, and there's a reason for my asking you about safety. Formula One has done so much in the last 10, 15 years about the safety of the drivers, and it's extraordinary. But today's terrible news about Diogo Jota, I think, makes us realize all the fragility of life, the inherent dangers involved with cars. I suppose my question is, Formula One will never, ever be complacent again, will it? And it'll always keep pushing the boundaries of safety for its drivers.
Of course. I mean, the sport's gone on a tremendous journey to make the car safer. From Sir Jackie Stewart really pioneering the way on making the cars safer, that we can still race, we can still do things that people can look up to and aspire to say the cars aren't slow, because then maybe that's not as attractive to watch. Of course, we still want the cars to be something that people are really aspiring to look at and watch. That's an extraordinary experience to watch. The tracks are getting safer. There's certainly been a big step on circuits being safer. And I think motorsport in general has been responsible for so much road safety in general. Traction control, tyre technology, mapping of engines, throttles, predictability. All these things comes from our industry, comes from Formula One, that goes on all the street cars here, ultimately gets into street cars, which is a positive thing. So the messaging, I think, from high-end Formula One and motorsports, that is the transfer of technology into street cars to make it safer for the users to have those cars. So absolutely not. There's never any blasé-ness of our sport. Jules Bianchi was our last tragic fatality in Suzuka that hit us all hard and still hits us hard to this day. And that was a sequence of absolutely extraordinary events where he tragically lost his life. So did we learn from that? Of course. As we did with Ayrton Senna, as we did with some other tragedies in our sport. But we still want to learn, move forward, race the cars. The drivers love putting their helmets on and racing. But yeah, I heard the tragic news this morning, just heartbreaking with his brother there. Something clearly has gone wrong, and yeah, it was tough to hear that news.
Absolutely, and everybody very much thinking of the Jota family. Thank you very much indeed, both of you. Really appreciate your time. Best of luck for Silverstone. For interviews with the big F1 drivers like Lando Norris and much more,
thank you.
Check out the Sports Agents podcast on Global Player or wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure you subscribe and follow. Don't forget to rate and review. Mark, Zak, thank you very much for joining us on the Sports Agents. Have a great weekend.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Before we go, we'd like to pay tribute to Liverpool and Portugal forward Diogo Jota, who has died in a car crash at 28 years old, alongside his brother, Andre Silva, who was 26 years old.
Just tragic. Diogo Jota only got married last month to his long-term partner. They had 3 children together. It is a horrific tragedy that affects, obviously, his family, and our thoughts are with them and his friends, but the football community and the Liverpool community, Gabby, obviously.
Obviously, yeah, he of course was part of their title-winning season last season. He was part of Portugal's win in the Nations League this year. At 28 years old, he had a very well-stuffed trophy cabinet, didn't he? He'd won many accolades and fans in the sport. And for his family, as you say, this is a human tragedy. His parents have lost their sons, their only children, and his wife will bring up her 3 children without him. And obviously, everything he did in football in many ways pales into insignificance, doesn't it, when you think of their families? So we're going to leave you with this message of tribute from Paul Machin.
Hi, yeah, so found out the devastating news about Diogo Jota's passing, and because the question is, how do you sum up the life of a 28-year-old footballer when you shouldn't have to? The first thought that really came to my mind was he was a player that came in from Wolves and wasn't necessarily one that was highly coveted or one that Liverpool may be clamouring for. He comes into a team that's just won the Premier League, a team that's got Mohamed Salah, Roberto Firmino and Mane, who we called the front three. And not only did he come in and hold his own, he actually added to the quality that Liverpool had. He was brilliant and he won over the Liverpool fan base almost immediately. There's one game that really sticks in my mind, and it's the League Cup quarter-finals at Anfield against Leicester. Liverpool put a weakened side out, 3-1 down at half-time. Jota comes on, gets a brilliant goal back, and it's an archetypal Jota goal. He's scrapping, he's fighting, and then he's on the shoulder, the last man, gets into the box, slams it across the goalie. He then ends up scoring the winning penalty as well, and he goes and gives it to the Leicester fans in celebration, who've been chanting some really unpleasant sort of stuff about Scousers and Liverpool and that throughout. And it just totally typified him as a footballer. Absolutely magic on the ball, predatory in front of goal, a great finisher, but also so gnarly, and he just got it as well. You know, he was clearly a really nice guy, but also had a real edge to his play as well, which is something that really, really appeals to Scousers and to Liverpool fans as well. He was great, a stunning footballer on his day. Gave us so many memories, one of the great Liverpool songs as well, one that I've sang myself hoarse to on a number of occasions, and I'm proud to be able to say that now. He'll be a huge loss to Liverpool, to Liverpool Football Club, to the footballing community, and obviously the most devastating part of this is his newlywed wife and kids, and yeah, my thoughts really go out to them on this most heartbreaking of days.